We've got just 10 weeks remaining until Queenslanders go to the polls, and the bookies have Premier Stephen Miles looking for a new job. The Liberal National Coalition is a very short $1.20, and poor old Stephen sits at $5. He'll need every day of those 10 weeks to make up that kind of ground. Let's go to Brisbane now and talk to veteran political journalist Adam Walters about what has been a little bit of a wild week in politics. Adam Walters, good to have you on the program. Is this a foregone conclusion, do you think?
I think so, Chris. The writing's been on the wall since he took over from Anastasia Palaszczuk. Stephen Miles has barely made an impression with the Queensland public. Anastasia Palaszczuk, let's remember, built on her success throughout her tenure over 3 consecutive campaigns, and the unions here in Queensland decided her time was up. They took a big gamble with Stephen Miles, and it's not going to pay a handsome dividend at all. He's in serious strife. The primary vote has been reduced, according to the latest poll, to just 26%. When you've got 82% of Queenslanders convinced, utterly convinced, that this government can't do anything about youth crime in this state, it's curtains.
Yeah. One of the big victories for opposition leader David Crisafulli was to ensure that the government overhauled the corruption watchdog. The Premier ran away from that this week. Why?
Well, they must be bringing out a new number plate, Chris. It used to be the Sunshine State. I think the new plate's going to read the Secrecy State, because this government is going out of its way to hide the truth from Queenslanders about the extent to which politicians and public servants have been behaving badly. In fact, legislation has been introduced to protect their reputations. It's now illegal to name a public servant who's been on the take. And all of this at the time when the chair of the Queensland Crime and Corruption Commission, former New South Wales Ombudsman Bruce Barber, is saying, please give us the powers to create greater transparency. He was at a recent Budget Estimates Committee begging the government to be able to be upfront about the real extent of the darkness that prevails here in Queensland.
Yeah, and the thing is, with Queensland's history with corruption, anything short of transparency is just a con, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, as baby journalists, Chris, you and I grew up with the dubious legend of Sir Joe and his sporadic antics, if you can put it politely. He's in kindergarten compared to this mob. I haven't seen anything so. I covered New South Wales politics for a long time, throughout the era of Joe Tripodi and Eddie O'B. They were held to account eventually, Eddie O'B was. In this state, it seems like they can get away with everything.
Yeah.
They won't even utter the words youth crime, which is the burning issue that cost them so heavily in those by-elections in suburban Brisbane earlier this year. They can't even utter the words. They can't be honest about the extent to which they've been spending taxpayer funds on private jets to fly to marginal seats. This government is not governing, it's electioneering, and it's shameless. Yeah. Absolutely shameless.
Exactly. I don't know whether Stephen Miles was just having fun with the electorate or having fun with his mates, or maybe he was serious, I don't know, but he's campaigning on the state owning petrol stations. It sounds like another Labor subsidy scheme to me.
It's a crazy gimmick, Chris, the same way that we saw him offering $1,000 to every single household for electricity relief. They're trying to buy votes.
Yeah.
In the same way they're offering 50-cent public transport fares. They are desperate. Labor's got an expression. And getting back to that point earlier about the perpetual campaign, they just want to, quote, run the show. And that's either federally or at a state level. They need to be running the show, but they're in trouble. The unions are on the nose now, thanks to the CFMEU, but there is one thing going for them, and that's the size of a bloated public service here in Queensland. You've got more than 250,000, and they're struggling to get frontline workers, nurses, teachers, police officers. But they have all sorts of government departments which are engaging people in jobs for life, and those jobs become generational. They're handed down through families. That's a huge electoral advantage. When you consider that every one of those people will know 10, 20 people, you're getting up to half the population. That's a massive electoral advantage for the Labor Party, the expansion of the public service. And so many of them are working from home post-COVID still. We saw Chris Minns in New South Wales ordering public service back to the CBD in recent days. None of that's happening in Brisbane. Baristas are going broke, restaurants are going under. And it's in a city which fancies itself as a cosmopolitan, international city worthy of the Olympic Games. It's struggling. It really is.
Yeah, very, very true. You make a really good point about the public servants being unofficial members of the Labor Party. What about David Crisafulli? Is he still doing an elbow and remaining a small target?
He seems to be. We saw that in his reluctance to have anything to do with Peter Dutton's plans for nuclear energy. Now, obviously, there's an argument in Queensland for those traditional mining resources to be protected, and nuclear is not traditional. We know that. It's controversial. As Donald Trump said yesterday, it has a branding problem when he was talking to Elon Musk. So Crisafulli's ducked away from that, whereas Peter Dutton has embraced it wholeheartedly, as we know, calling out the Labor Party's hypocrisy on their willingness to have nuclear subs in their heartland of Port Kembla. Labor's in an absolute knot over that. But despite that advantage, David Crisafulli's staying away from that. That's just, I think, the most glaring example. But after the Paris Games, I think it's time for him to step up.
Yeah.
You've got to remember that Brisbane's not Los Angeles. It's where the Games are going to be held next time. It doesn't have the fame and the romance and the heritage of Paris. Brisbane's got to start from scratch. A lot of people in the United States won't know where this city is. And when they do discover it, they'll say what Americans always say, oh, that's a long way to drive. They've got their submarine license, right? So this city has a lot of work to do. Next year, it's just going to be 84 months before the Games begin. They can't even make a decision about a stadium. There's no Eiffel Tower here as a magnet. They've got to start from scratch. So I think David Crisafulli, rather than sort of have that perpetual whine of the disgruntled opposition leader pointing out everything that's wrong, I think this is an opportunity for him now, given the inevitability of his ascension to become Premier, to get on the front foot, show some leadership and put Brisbane on the world map with just 7 years to go before the Olympic Games.
Yep. The small target strategy needs to end. He's got this one. Now get on the front foot and start looking like a premier. One quick thing. This is just a horrible thing to raise, but it has made front page news today because people are just shaking their heads and going, how? The 46-year-old mother of a student from an elite Gold Coast private school has been charged with her murder. 10-year-old Sophie Wang was found dead, allegedly with her throat slashed. How horrific. Do we know anything about this beyond what police have said?
Well, Chris, I mean, many people think journalists are a jaded lot, and most of the time they'd be right, but every now and again, as you know, a story like this comes along and it breaks you. It just knocks you out.
Oh, yeah.
It's beyond comprehension, beyond the wildest imagination. I mean, we saw 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, the story of Ebony Simpson, the primary school kid who was kidnapped on the way home from school, bound with piano wire and thrown into a dam. I mean, this story had the same impact on me. 10-year-old. As the seasoned detectives involved in this investigation said, it's the worst thing they've seen in their careers. And they're a hard bunch, detectives. Yep. They've seen a lot. And this guy leading the investigation on the Gold Coast today said that in his 15 years investigating serious crime, he's never been so shocked, so disturbed about the circumstances of the crime, and nor were his colleagues coping as well. Those at the crime scene have had to receive counselling. The kids at the school the victim attended have had to receive counselling. I mean, there are so many victims in this. Obviously, this girl has lost her life in the most horrific circumstances. When you think that her classmates in year 5 have to process this somehow. Yeah. It's horrific. It's going to be a dubious milestone in their lives. What I'm hearing is that the mother, who has been charged with the murder, and this is yet to be presented by way of evidence in court, Chris, so we've got to be very careful about preempting that process. But there has apparently been mental health issues with the mother.
Right.
And she was arrested 4 hours after her daughter's body was discovered by her father, who's a very well-known academic on the Gold Coast, and that community too has been shaken to its core.
Yeah, I bet it is. I bet it is. Adam Walters, you've been a star tonight. Thank you so much with all the latest on the politics of Bris Vegas, and only 10 weeks to go. We look forward to the election campaign. Thank you so much for your time, mate.